Last month, I bought this 1997 7.3 Powerstroke, did some minor fixes to get it back on the road, and got it cleaned up. Now, a month later, all the dopamine from buying it has worn off, and now it's actually time to fix everything that's wrong with it. And we are back. It is finally time for me to address the crazy oil leak that is going on with this thing. I do not know what it is, but we are going to find out. The first thing that I need to do is to get this truck pulled up onto some ramps so that I have a little bit better access to the undercarriage. Currently, there is oil absolutely everywhere, and I really do not want to be rubbing up all over it. I'm trying to give myself a little bit of extra room. Oh, we're already leaking. All right. Once again, for good measure. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is actually come over on the passenger side wheel well and just give you guys a good look at what this whole passenger side looks like. You can see on my leaf spring, all the way up from the front leaf spring mount, back to the rear leaf spring mount, the front axle, the passenger side of the frame, and then it gets even worse as we get closer to the oil pan. I mean, that stuff is just crazy thick. Let's come under the front of the motor now and see what we're looking at. Yeah, we can see a lot of oil kind of directly below where the front cover would be. It is currently dripping from the passenger side above the oil pan. Man, it's really hard to tell all what's up there. I'm gonna have to jump on the top side of the motor and look at this also. Geez, it's hard to be under here right now. There is literally so much oil. It's dripping off of my U-bolt bracket. Look at that. That's crazy. So I was looking up in this passenger area on the front of the motor, and I was thinking to myself, man, this oil runoff here is really watery. So I went and grabbed my flashlight. Oh no. That's definitely green. Oil is not green. Well, at least the passenger side of the motor is dry. That's some good news. Man, I really need to get down right where the oil is dripping from. Whoa. Yeah, that ain't right. What the? You gotta be kidding me. You guys gotta look at this. That right there is my oil dipstick tube connection. I feel like I shouldn't be able to undo this by hand, right? There's no way that's supposed to be like that. Are you kidding me? That's great. Look at this. What? There's no way that's right at all. Okay, so I want to get a good look at the top side of the motor as well. It's up pretty high right now, but I definitely need to get a better look at what's going on up here in my front cover and over towards my dipstick and everything on that side. So I'm poking around up on top of the motor currently, and I'm looking down here below the alternator bracket. And you can just barely see the area that I'm shining my flashlight into right now. It looks oddly wet. Now I'm pretty sure that this right here is my H-pop, but I don't see any additional fittings for it that go down that far. And if I look down in the valley of the motor, I can see that it's dry the entire way through. It's really only wet right up here towards the front. Also, looking towards the passenger side valve cover, I can see it is soaked all the way around. So right now you're looking at the frontmost passenger side valve cover bolt, and you can see how wet it is, especially moving down. The further down you go, the wetter it gets. And I'm having a hard time figuring out if this is coming directly from the valve cover or if it's coming from something more central towards the motor like the H-pop. At this point, I'm figuring I'm basically just gonna have to end up taking all of this off to see what's going on in here, but I'm not sure I'm doing that today. Also, if you can see down towards the passenger side of my water pump, that is a big old puddle of coolant. Yay! This is the first of many things I have bought to address the numerous oil leaks that I believe that this truck is suffering from. This is what I believe to be an upgrade to the dipstick tube holder that connects to the outside of the oil pan with these rubber gaskets, and this piece goes on the inside of the oil pan in order to make room for it to seal, like that. I think that this will do a pretty good job at getting the majority of whatever issues I'm having with the dipstick tube holder. I was originally going to go with an OEM style replacement, but then I saw these all over the internet and people had really good luck with them. So I'm going to give this a shot and see what it goes. It also came with some nice O-rings that I put back onto the dipstick tube itself. So the first step in this process to get this thing going appears to be taking off the dipstick tube holder, which looks like it's only held on by that single bolt right there. Looks to be something like a 10 mil. Let's go ahead and crack it and see what it does. So once that's out, now we can move the dipstick around freely, and I believe we're just supposed to pull it straight out of the dipstick tube holder down at the bottom of the motor. So let's see what's going on down there. So underneath the truck, after you get the dipstick tube holder down up top, you can get your favorite piece of grabbing equipment, grab onto the bottom of the dipstick tube itself, and give it a good yank and it'll come right on out of the dipstick tube holder. Once you get this out, it looks like you can just set it off to the side and then we can work on getting this thing off. Well, I believe this is the best viewing angle that I can possibly get for you guys for this job. Also, before I forget, I went ahead and pulled the dipstick out of the dipstick tube itself, and I'm just kind of letting this thing hang around right here. Now, in all of the videos that I watched and the instructions that were sent with this piece, it says that I'm supposed to take this retaining nut off and then just drop the old adapter into the bottom of the oil pan. I've checked this a few times. It seems to be right. I can't physically get this out through the side of the oil pan here, so I guess it has to do that. It feels very wrong. And let's be for real, there's probably like a 50% chance this oil pan has to come off at some point anyway, so who knows? Now that I have this nut off, this thing is super loose. It is like literally about to fall in on its own. And it just fell. Well, okay. Oh, I can feel it right here. It's just sitting directly below where the oil pan is. I bet you I can grab it. Let's see here, try and go fishing. I don't want to accidentally knock it down any further than it already is. Well, there it goes. Okay, it's down there now, so I hope I didn't need to pull anything off of it. I guess the next step is to get this thing cleaned off as best as I can and then put the new part on. Gosh, this whole thing is just so gross. I can't believe how much oil is here and how long it's been here. It's literally falling off on top of me right now. And yes, I'm trying to do my best to keep it from going in the hole that is on the side of the oil pan. I don't know, we're winging it. That's what I do most of the time. Minimal upfront planning and maximal pain in my ass. Should be illegal for something to be this oily. Ooh, raining crusties. Jesus Christ. Pop, pop. Oh, I can almost see the original paint now. Almost. Not yet. Alright, that's enough. I'm going straight for the scraper. Oh yeah, it's barely even doing anything. Awesome. What is this stuff, dude? I want to take a big old scoop of it off the side. Oh yeah. Good Lord. Huh. How much you want to bet if you throw this in the fuel tank of an IDI, it'll still run? Man, no doubt the cleanest this section of the oil pan has been in the last decade. I don't even know what that is. This isn't even oil up top. It's just like crust. Also, what are these lines? I have no clue where these things go to. Transmission, I guess? Oh, yeah, transmission, definitely. These are probably coming from my trans cooler. Okay, I guess that's pretty clean. It's way cleaner than it was. Okay, I reckon it's time to put the new part on. Now, assuming I can follow directions, which is indeed a big assumption, I'm pretty sure this backing piece, the little silver part, kind of shimmies its way on in, like so. Then with the extra screw, you're supposed to find the back part of it. somewhere. Oh, it's probably hanging down. How in the world does this work? You're not even all the way in. Hang on. Well, it's supposed to go down like that and then come in like this, right? You're supposed to be able to get the whole piece in. Oh, like that? Almost. It's not fully flush against the oil pan, though. Oh, there we go. I got it. Okay, that's sitting in there. I wonder if this is just lined up. Nope. Okay. Well, what a good that did. Yeah, this thing is facing down. So do I gotta try and line it up while it's down here? Is that the spot where the threads are? No, I probably have to play a guessing game for those, huh? Oh, this is fun. This is really fun. Oh, no way, I got it. Sweet. Okay. Hell yeah. Now I can start threading this in. Please don't back your way out. All right. Tighten that down and see what we got. You kind of have to rotate it into position. It locks into place. And we can start to tighten. Now, the guides say to torque this down to something like 10 foot-pounds. If you think I'm putting a torque wrench on this, you are insane. 10 and 10. 50% of the time, that works every time. I'm also just going to start scraping away some of the rest of this underneath it, because if I actually want to see if this thing worked and if my oil leaks stop, I need there to not be oil down here. Geez, you'd think I'd have a hole in my oil pan or something. Oh wait, I guess I kind of did. I think I'm just going to try and pull the dipstick tube out from above and clean it off as well. Huh, I never actually realized just how tiny this thing is. It's really small. I mean, it's perfectly average. Well, I'm going to try my best to clean this off down here. I can't even tell. Oh, yeah, it doesn't have an O-ring. Jesus Christ, what happened to this thing? I got new O-rings in the little kit that I bought, and they're supposed to go on here, I believe, but there wasn't even one on here. That's just crazy. That's pretty clean, though, and ready to install some of the new O-rings that I got in my kit. Let's see, how easily do you slide on? Oh, very, actually, and they fit. Nice, that doesn't always happen. I guess let's get this thing put back into place. If you're curious on where this goes, you kind of have to fish it almost in between the valve cover and whatever that is down there. I have no clue what that is. I thought it was the exhaust, but then I realized, oh, it's probably not the exhaust. Well, there it is, slid into place. Now we can go pop it in on the downside and then get it hooked back up here. Now, because this is a dry O-ring going in, I'm gonna go ahead and lubricate it a little. Let's see, I can take some oil from my leaf spring if I wanted to, lubricate that, or off my starter, use that also, or on the bottom of my differential. That stuff's still nice and wet. Get it positioned and pop it down into place. Pretty satisfying click that confirms to me it's in. We're gonna see how that does. Back up on the top side, I'm gonna throw the dipstick retainer back on, get it connected to the valve cover, put my dipstick itself back in, go from there, I guess. You know, just for the fun of it, let's see what my oil level is right now. Oh, it's on the dipstick at least. It's not horrible, I guess. It's there. I'll take it. Okay, and we're done. Honestly, that was pretty easy. It wasn't too bad at all. Did it work? I don't know. I gotta go get some oil, fill it back up, and run this thing for a while and find out. Did I think that that was the #1 fix for all of the oil leaks? After getting a look at everything, no, I don't. I'm pretty sure there are a few other leaks going on, but it's definitely the first step in the right direction for getting this thing back on the road reliably. Now I just have to do everything else too. We are going to go into some of that classic T4. I know that that's what's in the truck right now because when I bought it from the old owner, he gave me like 2 gallons of this stuff, and I have gone through basically all of it while driving this. So let's just top it up and see if our oil leak on the bottom comes back. Because I'm not actually super confident that the oil fix I've done so far has cured all of my oil leaks, I'm not going to try and fill this thing up all the way because I think I'm just going to leak all the oil out. I really just want to fill it up enough so that I feel comfortable starting it and moving it across the yard. Somewhere around there should be good. There we go. Step 1 is down. Now it's time to flip the switch and look at my coolant leak, see what's going on there. First things first, in getting access to the water pump, we need to drain all the coolant. We can do this from a valve on the bottom of the radiator on the driver's side of the vehicle. Make sure to bring over enough buckets that you can catch the coolant that's going to drain from the radiator. I'm expecting this to be anywhere between 4 and 6 gallons for this truck. So this is that valve that I was talking about. It's actually called a petcock valve. It's just used to drain the coolant or water out of a radiator. You turn it to the left and it starts draining. If you want to, you can hook up a small tube directly to it, or you can just do what I do and drop a couple buckets underneath to catch the coolant as it's falling out. We're going to have a lot of time on our hands while this coolant is draining, so next thing I'm going to tackle is the fan. There's a lot of different ways that you can get a fan clutch off. I happen to have the specific tools that you can use for this job. If you don't have a specific fan clutch wrench or the fan pulley holder, you can make this by grinding down, for my truck in this case it's a 47 mil wrench, in order to fit in between the fan and the fan pulley itself to get on to the nut that holds it in place. And then you can just replace this with a pair of water pump pliers or a leverage screwdriver. It's a little bit more difficult doing it that way. You can also just get an appropriate size wrench and whack it with a hammer or an air hammer, and that stands a pretty good chance of getting it off. But if I have the specific tools, I'm just going to use them. That makes the job a lot simpler. The first step is getting the fan pulley tool around some of those bolt heads that you can see on the fan pulley, like so. That way that you can work leverage against the fan bolt as you have the wrench on it. Now while they're both in place, while you have a good amount of leverage, give it one good pull, and that should loosen up the nut that holds the fan on from the fan pulley. Now right before the fan is about to come off the pulley, I'm going to stop right here so that way I can remove the fan shroud from the radiator and lift all of this up in one go. But in order to take it all the way out with the fan, we do have to remove the upper radiator hose because it's blocking. And it looks like our radiator is just about done draining, so there should be minimal fluid coming from the upper radiator hose. Grab and remove the clamp that's holding the upper radiator tube to the radiator itself. And wiggle and remove the upper radiator tube. Just kind of bend it back in place for now. That frees up enough room for us to finish removing the fan. Then we can remove the fan and the radiator fan shroud all in one go. Once you have access to the water pump pulley here, you can use the pulley tool that we had from earlier, and this is by far the easiest way I found out to do this. Hook it on to 2 of the bolts on the front of the water pump pulley and use that to leverage against the bolt that you're trying to turn. Once you get everything in place, and these are super on there, you're able to break it, not with ease, but it makes it much easier than trying to do this by jamming a screwdriver in here. You also want to make sure you don't pull the bolt out all the way, because you still need the head of the bolt in order to get the next one loose. There we go. Move it into position, apply some tension, and break it loose. Now all 4 of these bolts are loose. We can grab a 15 mil socket attached to a breaker bar, throw that on the belt tensioner, loosen it, get some slack in the belt, and just pull it all the way off. Looking at the condition of this belt, it's in pretty good shape. Also, judging by how shiny this belt tensioner is, I'm going to guess that somebody's been in here and has done this job pretty recently. Once you remove all 4 bolts, the water pump pulley comes right off. So this is actually where I'm going to stop making progress on the water pump and shift my focus to the alternator and the alternator bracket. Underneath these is where I suspect the second area for oil leaks is coming from. Once you get the belt off, you'll be able to access the top 3 bolts here, here, and here, setting the alternator in place. You can take those off, then you have another 4 bolts, one on the top, one on each side, and one on the very bottom of the alternator bracket, and this whole thing will come off and get access to the areas just behind it. The belt tensioner pulley here can stay in place as well. It'll come off with this. This side bolt is a huge pain to get to with the belt tensioner pulley being right in the way, but if you get a 13 mil, work it in behind here, you can loosen it up just enough to remove it from the block itself and keep the bolt in place. And with the final bolt removed, this whole thing pulls out and up. I have just pulled off the alternator bracket that is situated here at the front of the motor, and this is what I'm looking at. There's a few things to digest. However, I feel as though I found my oil leak problem. My coolant situation might be another story. I went ahead and pulled these wires out of the way and just moved them off to the side, and I noticed that they were hooked up to this sensor here. Now, during all my research from this truck so far, I actually didn't know that this sensor existed in this spot. I believe this is a secondary coolant temp sensor, the primary coolant temp sensor being here in the thermostat house. But this secondary coolant temp sensor, it looks like it threads directly into the front of the block. I went ahead and pulled it out, and this is definitely a good indication that there was some sort of long-term coolant leak in this area. Now, if we look in the area just below where that sensor threads into, we can see the spot where coolant was pooling right up in here. I was originally under the assumption that it was this front area and these bolts that had worked their way loose, or that the gasket between the water pump and the block had compromised, and that was leaking coolant back into this small valley. But after looking at this hole, there's definite signs of long-term coolant being exposed and moving its way down into that area now, and then dripping all the way down through the front of the motor. Now, this is legitimately great news, because I was under the impression that this was a failing water pump, or at the very least a failing water pump gasket, and in replacing it, I was just going to go through, replace the water pump, the thermostat housing, and do the whole 9 yards there. But now it really seems like it's a worn out coolant temp sensor. I might even be able to get away with putting some thread tape over the sensor threads, screwing it back in, and that in itself could fix my whole leak, and I wouldn't have to go through and replace the water pump. That would be amazing. Here we go. I cleaned up the threads with a wire brush, went ahead and threw a few layers of thread tape on. I should be able to get this back in its spot and have no more coolant leaks. All done. Started threading it in by hand, finish it off with a ratchet, get it nice and tight. Now, I'm not super confident with these motors. However, I believe that this is my high pressure oil rail. It gets fed high pressurized oil from the H-pop, and then stores that high pressurized oil ready for on-demand injection for the high pressure oil system with the injectors. And I believe this is one of 4 plugs on each side front and rear heads that are constantly under pressure with an O-ring on the inside. I'm going to grab a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, stick it in here, loosen this up, and see what it looks like. Once this plug comes out, be ready, because quite a bit of oil is going to come from this new hole, so just grab yourself an oil catch can and set it down below. But in terms of the condition of this O-ring, I would say it is pretty well destroyed. And I think I found the reason why my oil leak was so bad up here. It is a new day with new parts. This is a straight from the dealer oil rail plug. You can see my invoice, the part number here, and the final price, almost $45 for this little guy. We can take a second to compare it to the one that I pulled out of the truck. It's definitely the same part, but it's hard not to notice the differences, especially with the O-rings themselves and also the faces of the plugs. I don't know if 30 years ago these were the standard part that they used, and then over time they just switched it maybe to be more in line with parts used on other vehicles. But these are definitely not the exact same part. However, they are the same dimensions, the same thread, and the same size. Before we can actually install the plug, we got to make sure that the surface that it bolts and that the gasket mates is nice and clean. So I'm just going to go in with some shop rags right now, wipe all the oil out of there that's been draining overnight, From my perspective, by the way, the threads look fantastic. There's no real Mars in the mating surface of the gasket, so I'm not super concerned. It does make me question how that big cut got put in the gasket in the first place. I'm guessing that is just a thing that happens. Then I'm going to stuff my rag back in there where the gasket mating surface is so that I can get access to the threads. Go in with some brake clean and just give it another good wipe down. And then we can go in with the end rail plug. And with the ratchet, you can start tightening down the plug. You can feel right at the point where the threads are fully engaged. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my torque wrench and torque it to spec. Make sure you got your torque wrench set to 60 foot-pounds and tighten until you click. There we go. Now fully installed. Since this is the absolute most room I'm going to have in the front of the motor, I'm really going to take my time and try and clean up all of the oil and residue that has been built on here for the last couple of years. From the top all the way down to the cross member and the motor mounts and part of the front suspension as well. I'm just going to try and clean up this whole area as best as I can while I have the access. After some simple green and a pressure washer, I got this area looking really good. Now it's time to go ahead and throw all this stuff back together. There we go, alternator bracket and alternator thrown back on and plugged back in. Up next is putting on the water pump pulley. I'll use the same pulley tool I used to take it off to put it back on. Once I get that hooked up, I should be able to throw the belt on, then the fan with the fan shroud, and button up a few other things. I'm not recording most of this today because it is like literally over 100 degrees right now. It is so hot. I just want to get this job done and get out of the heat. Everything is now put back together, bolted into place. Don't forget to throw the upper radiator hose on, get it clamped to the upper portion of the radiator, make sure to close the radiator petcock, and then I can finally start filling this thing up. I started filling this up by putting in a whole gallon of water, and then I followed it up with 1 whole gallon of concentrated coolant. I went ahead and cut the gallon water bottle in half and used that as my funnel for all the rest of it. And then after the first 2 gallons, I just went half a gallon of water, half a gallon of coolant, back and forth until I got the coolant reservoir somewhat filled up to the level that I wanted it at. Also, keep in mind when I go to start this thing, because I drained all of the oil from the high pressure oil rail, it's going to take quite a few cranks in order for that oil pressure to build back up again to start firing the injectors. Now, after running the truck up to temp and filling the coolant reservoir and the oil, I actually had to take a break from working on the truck for about a week, and I really wasn't able to drive it much at all. So about a week later, I finally get to drive it again, check for more coolant or oil leaks, and it gives me the chance to come up with a game plan for the transmission. So this is the first drive back in the truck after I've done all the work to it. I want to give it a test drive, see what the oil leak has boiled down to, and then also kind of refamiliarize myself with what the transmission's doing. Man, that first to second shift, it happens right around 18 or 20 miles an hour. And right now it feels like it's 2,000, 2,200 RPM, somewhere around there. It's just so harsh though. I don't understand what it's doing. When I go really slow off of a stop, it's just super firm. I can feel it shudder the whole transmission and drivetrain. And then 2 to 3 at the same amount of throttle is just smooth. And then 3 to 4, same amount of throttle is smooth as well. And then if I really get on it, perfect. It's a perfect shift. No complaints, no shudder. It moves right into second gear, no problems, no slipping, no nothing. God, it's so weird. During my drive, I didn't actually give that good of a sense of what this feels like. It's kind of like every time you go to shift, somebody literally runs into you. I mean, it is so harsh, and I need to figure out what's wrong. And then for hopefully the final time, I get to lay down a fresh piece of cardboard and see what happens with our oil leak. I went ahead and let the truck sit for about 20 minutes, let it cool down a little bit so I can crawl underneath. Let's check and see what the oil looks like. Oh, dude, that's it. That's all the oil on this whole thing. So there's a couple drops here, another drop here, and another drop here. After looking underneath the truck, these two are coming from the rear oil pan area, and then this one looks like it's dripping from the cover of the transmission bell housing. Overall though, this is so much better than when I first got the truck. Looking at those old videos and photos, this is basically nothing in comparison. In order for us to appropriately diagnose and then treat our transmission issue, there's a few things that we need to look at and inspect. So based on information I found from all over the internet and from a few comments on my last video, thank you guys so much by the way, there are 6 possible reasons my transmission is acting weird. First up are my fuses, then my third brake lights. Third is my PSOM or speedometer module and my speed sensor. Then my throttle position sensor, manual lever position sensor, and finally, if it's none of those, it has to be my valve body accumulator. So going down the list and starting with the most simple components to check, the in-cab fuses, which look like this. Test each fuse for continuity using a multimeter set to measure ohms or resistance. Basically, if you touch both contacts with the probes and it beeps, that means that the fuse is good. And it looks like all these check out. Let's also check the fuse box under the hood. And at least the PCM power relay, which all come back as good. Now, in doing my research preparing for this segment tackling the transmission, it's really odd seeing how many different components actually contribute to the transmission functioning. But at the very least, we can cross fuses off of our list because we know that those are good. And then next, we can start looking at the third brake lights. If this really is what's wrong with my truck, I am going to be amazed. I would be very surprised if there was actually anything wrong with the third brake light causing the transmission to act up, but you never know. Well, here's what I'm looking at. Try and wiggle this out. Huh. Well, that definitely looks a little crispy. It's worn in, that's for sure. I'm not sure the bulb itself is burnt. I don't know. Number 2. Ooh. Oh yeah. Look at that thing. Goodness. Look at this bulb. Okay. God, this thing has exploded. Well, that is interesting, because I definitely have at least one of these bulbs is completely burnt out, which people online have been saying that that is a cause of the transmission acting up. Wow, this looks really bad. I guess I'm going to grab some sandpaper because there's definitely a lot of corrosion going on in here and try and sand some of these contact points. So I got this real small strip. I'm using 320 grit. Try and size it and fold it and just kind of work it into these contacts a little. wiggle it back and forth, clean up that surface mating area. I don't fully understand how the relationship between the third brake light and the transmission work, but there have been too many people at this point telling me that I need to look into this for it to not be true. So we'll see what happens. Last one, cleaned out. All right, let's get these new bulbs in. 1, 2, and 3. Pop these into place and put this whole thing on. Wow, I can't believe that we actually did have a problem with our third brake light, like so many people have said. Will this fix my transmission issue? I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and test out everything before we actually take the truck on another test drive, but we can go ahead and cross this off our list. So up next on the list is the PSOM, or the Programmable Speedometer Odometer Module. This is essentially a computer located behind the instrument cluster on these trucks, and it kind of works in conjunction with the VSS, or the Vehicle Speed Sensor. Now, from what I've been able to gather, unless you want to actually pull the cluster apart and test the electronic connections directly on the module, which I don't want to do right now because I actually don't think that this is my problem, the number one telltale sign that your PSOM is going bad is a very erratic and bouncy speedometer. And if we look at mine, it is nothing like that last one. I get that the road I'm driving on is a little bumpy, whatever, but if we look actually at the needle on the speedometer, it's pretty solid. It moves around a little bit, but nothing like comparing it to the other one. This is good enough for me to say that the PSOM is likely okay and is not the cause of my transmission problem, and it lets me move on to the vehicle speed sensor. The VSS is held on by one bolt on top of the rear differential. It's pretty straightforward to remove, and mine is looking very dirty. Bringing it over to the workbench, I want to give it a good clean. Now, I don't think that that was contributing to the sensor output. However, the only test I'll be doing is another continuity test with my multimeter, similar to what I did with the fuses. Having each probe touching one pin on the sensor lets us read the internal resistance, and it looks like this one is coming back around 12.5 ohms. Now that is within spec, so it tells me at least that the internal components of the sensor are good, and I'm going to go ahead and cross it off of my list. Up next, I need to check my throttle position sensor. Now this is a bit of a tricky one because I want to test the sensor output, which means it has to be done in the truck. Using a safety pin and a sewing pin, I can probe into the first and third pins of the sensor, then test voltage output with my multimeter. While slowly pressing down on the gas pedal, I'm making sure that my voltage output is steady and linear. If I had a dead spot at any point, that could affect how my transmission acts. And it looks like I'm good, so I'm going to go ahead and cross it off. So the last electrical component on my list is the manual lever position sensor, which is located on the driver's side transmission and connects directly to the shift linkage. This is essentially the component that tells the truck what the transmission is supposed to be doing, so that if it's in park, reverse, or drive. First things first, we need to remove the shift linkage. Then, while holding on to the shift lever so it doesn't move, loosen the main retaining nut. Then remove the shift lever altogether. Finally, 2 small bolts hold the sensor in place, and once they're out, the sensor can be brought out and over to the workbench. So the way that this works is it connects to the shift lever via those small keyways, and as you select different gears, it moves an internal arm, which makes different contacts and sets a specific level of resistance depending on the gear. Now we can use a quarter and manually move the arm in order to test the resistance on the bench. We'll need to hook our probes up to pin 46 and pin 30 in order to get the right readings. So it looks like we are within range for neutral, drive, second, and first.
Then moving back up, we are also good for reverse and park. Now, before I go and tear my whole transmission apart, I really quickly just want to take the truck on a test drive and see if in the off chance any of the stuff I have done or have fixed or have cleaned happens to have fixed the transmission.
Nope, exactly the same as before. Sweet. Well, I was hopeful, but on to the next.
Alright, well that was the last thing on my list, which means it's time to tear the transmission down and get my accumulator out.
Yeah, back here at the transmission pan, I kind of always knew that this thing was going to have to come off anyway, and so I figure while I'm in there, I might as well see what the accumulator's looking like.
Hey, by the way, if you guys are doing this job and pulling off the trans filter, just make sure that you're prepared to catch all of the fluid that's going to come out as soon as you rip it from the opening. You can tell I was not. Yeah, real fun mess I get to clean up. A lot of good that did.
Now we are looking at the main valve body area of an E4OD transmission. There are three important things under here: your accumulator valve body, your primary valve body, and then over here your solenoid pack. The only thing I'm going to be touching is this guy, my accumulator body. In order to get the accumulator body out, we have to remove a 10 mil nut here, a 10 mil nut here, and then every single one of these 8 mil bolts that is on the accumulator body side of this line here. So everything there in this way has to come out. Now that we have the valve body accumulator out of the truck and brought over to the workbench, we can see that it's arranged into these 4 separate chambers. Each one of these chambers is holding a specific spring set and valve for different gear shifts. This controls second gear, this controls third gear, this controls fourth gear. Each one of these valve and spring assemblies will control the harshness of each of the respective shifts. Then in this chamber here, it also contains our line boost valve and its respective spring. The first test we can do to see if this is all functioning is a test of the valves actually opening and moving. We do this with a small pick jammed at the very back of each of the valve access ports, pressing against it and releasing it to hear a snap. I know 2's good. 3's good. And 4's good as well. The next step is to actually pull each of the respective springs and valves out of their holding cylinders. And we can do that by grabbing one of the bolts that held this in place, threading it into the end of the plug, and with a key ring bent to a small 90-degree tip, insert underneath the metal retainer and pull it out. Now using the bolt, we should be able to wiggle the plug out and get access to our spring. There's also a spring seat that comes out with it. So my spring here looks and feels like it's in pretty decent shape. It's hard to say if this was the specific component causing any issues or if it was something further down with the valve, which has one more locking retainer holding it in place. So I'm going to break this down even further because I am going to disassemble and clean every single component here. So same thing to pull this retainer out and be ready to catch the spring that will release. This really tiny spring here looks like it's also in good shape. And then finally the valve needs to come out. We can work it out from the back with a pick. Then we can coax the little valve out from its resting spot with a dead blow whacking on the end of it, and it'll eventually fall out. Next step is to do the exact same for the third and fourth gear springs and valves. With a lot of persuasion and quite a few difficulties along the way, I now have my second, third, and fourth valve and spring assemblies out. A few of these different parts, like getting these retainers out or knocking the whole assembly with the valves out, can be pretty frustrating. But just keep at it, don't get frustrated, use the right tools, and it'll all work its way out eventually. Finally, the last step is to get access to my line boost spring and my line boost valve. So this plug doesn't have a threaded insert that we can get access to, but if we pull this retainer clip off and just whack this end with a hammer, this will eventually come out and work its way loose. You can see it's starting to work its way out. Oh. Well, it came out. Okay. Make sure I got everything here. Well, we have the plug, this piece that fits in the plug, the spring seat here, the main spring, and then the valve itself. So it does look like we have everything. And this all goes in line like so, with the retainer here. Now that we have everything out, I'm going to give the accumulator body itself a really good clean with some mineral spirits, a little bit of brake clean, and blow it dry.
All right, I gotta be honest with you guys. By the time I got to this point, I was feeling very worried. I sincerely expected there to be something wrong. Any one of these components could have been wrong, and that been an underlying cause of the weird transmission issues we've been feeling. But it was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong here. I don't understand. The only thing I could do at this point was to just push forward with the plan that I had in mind and see what happens in the end. I just sincerely hope that all of this wasn't for nothing.
Up next, we're going to be installing a Transgo shift kit. This is the more mild SK shift kit for the E40D. And it comes with a few different spring assemblies. You can change out the drum and the pump, and a few other additional internal changes to the valve body itself. But the primary change we're going to be making is to our accumulator. Now this kit will change the springs
and one of the valves specifically for second gear. Following their directions, it's pretty simple and straightforward. You match up the specific springs in the line that they're supposed to go in, and when you have them arranged correctly, they will be one inside of the other, just like this. So let's get these all put together and get ready to get the accumulator put back in. Accumulator body is now thoroughly cleaned all the way through. I have all of my new assemblies ready to be put back in. You put them back in just the same as you did taking them out. I'll throw a little bit of fresh ATF on everything to help keep it lubed up. Then this will be ready to put back in the truck. Now that the bottom of the transmission is taken care of, I'm going to grab the skinniest funnel that I have, throw it in the transmission dipstick tube, and fill it up with 4 to 6 quarts to start and kind of see where it marks there. And this is going to be a very slow fill. Very slow.
Alright, so for anyone that's curious, I'm using a Valvoline Max Life multi-vehicle ATF, mainly because I knew it would play nice with the fluid that's already in the trans, but also because this is a Mercon 5 or a Dexmerc blend, and I knew it's the type that we're supposed to use for these E4ODs. After about 4, maybe 4.5 quarts, it looks like I got a good amount of fluid on my dipstick. Then after turning the truck on, cycling between park, reverse, neutral, drive, back and forth a few times to get some of that fluid sucked up into the pump, I was able to put in about another 3 quarts.
Well, I finished up with the transmission fluid. I put in just under 8 quarts. I measured how much I took out. It was right about that much too, and so I'm really expecting this to go pretty smoothly. Well, it's actually backing up out of the garage, so that's a good start. And it moves forward too. Oh, I tell you what, it actually engages really nicely when it goes in to reverse or into drive. Okay, I'm pulling out onto the main road now. This is the moment of truth, my first second gear shift. Oh, it's so smooth! It's like butter, oh my God. We fixed it. And third and fourth is good too. Yes! Oh, this is awesome. This is such a good feeling. Pulling away from the second stop sign, make sure it's not a fluke, and it's not. It is so smooth. Oh my gosh. This thing drives like a brand new truck. I am speechless.
Hey, if you stayed and watched until the very end, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. The support for my last video was overwhelming. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.